David, I came across your course title and absolutely love it. It is Mastering Influence, the Science of Getting Things Done Through Others. And so I was super excited to speak with you to find out more about, your course, the research that you've done and gone into it. So yeah, how did you come up with this idea?
That's a great question. Well, first, Joe, thanks so much for having me on the podcast. I'm super excited to be here. And I'm excited to talk about the course. So the course sort of grew out of a desire to bring the cutting edge of research in like behavioral science, behavioral economics to MBA students, and other kinds of students and practitioners through workshops. So what we're really trying to do is give them a framework for thinking about how to effectively influence other people. And this is surprisingly not a standard topic taught in business schools or anywhere else. It's taught in a few other places besides NUS. For example, Wharton and Harvard. But other than that, it's extremely rare. And I introduced it to NUS, or my version of it, because I thought it was absolutely crucial. And if I were just going to recommend, if I were an MBA student and there was one class that I would want to take myself, this would have been my dream class. So I don't have an MBA, I have a PhD, but if I did, then this is what I would want to learn. So I try to like take that perspective, because the truth is influencing people is really hard. And we have a lot of intuition about how to influence other people. But the truth is, some of those intuitions are right and some of them are wrong. And what I wanted to do was first give students a framework for thinking about how they can influence other people. So the first thing I wanted to do is expand their mental toolbox of influence tools. And when we talk about influence tools, one of the most common ones that always comes up is monetary incentives. So that's kind of like the go-to thing. And certainly this is because there's a huge long tradition in business schools about like game theory and like the prisoner's dilemma, financial rewards, like compensation. And it really permeates almost anything. For example, when most people think about negotiations, like job negotiations, they think about, they literally say salary negotiations. That's how they think about it, right? So the mental model of job negotiation is salary negotiations. But if you've ever taken, say, a negotiations course, then you know that immediately that's not a great way of thinking about it. And you're kind of setting yourself up for failure for multiple reasons. So one is if you think about the job negotiation, the salary negotiation, you're only going to ask about one thing. And you're going to create a tug of war between you and the recruiter or the employer with whom you're negotiating. It's going to feel like a fight, an unproductive fight, and you'll walk away thinking, well, that was a bad experience. And like, I also think that like when we think about more generally what motivates other people, we kind of have this like cynical view of, I'm supposed to list the top 10 motivators. Like, why do people in the business world do what they do? Well, the number one thing people list at the top is money. Like, I see money changing hands all the time. I know people are being paid for what they do, and it's very salient to me. And so that's how I perceive their motivation. It's like, okay, maybe other things now and then, but mostly it's about money. But if I ask you, what motivates you? Like, what are the top 10 things you would care about in your job? Like, money is probably somewhere in the top 10, but it's probably not number one. It's not for most people. For most people, it's around number 3 or number 4. So there are other things that are more important to us than money. But when it comes to other people, those intrinsic fears, like wanting to feel like you're doing something valuable and wanting to feel like you're respected and you have like control, in your workplace, rather than you're just being yanked around all the time and you're doing something that you think is pointless. Like, those things really matter to people on the day-to-day level, but they're kind of invisible, silenced. And so for other people, we don't see it. So it's out of sight, out of mind. So what I want to do is start reprogram people's intuition, which maybe were like good intuitions, let's say 2 million years ago, right? Think of like fight or flight. That's really valuable when you're living in a life and death world every single day. Got to run. If I have a 50-50 chance of like doubling my food or reducing my food to zero, you could never do that, right? In like the ancestral environment on the savannah. But in today's world, it's completely different, right? If there's a risk that I could take that has positively expected value, I should go for it basically every single time. But most people don't. And they're afraid of short-term losses, right? Too afraid. And if they could just out of that fear, they would do so much better, both today and certainly in the long term over time. So I'll leave it there for now as the introduction and then hit you with your next question.
Yeah, absolutely. So once again, I'm super excited. I want to actually attend your class because it's some fascinating stuff. It's a fascinating topic as well. I think you're right. It's extremely important to any business professional. So I want to talk about the framework in a little bit, but you mentioned that top 10 list and you mentioned if money is number 3 or 4, what do you see as the top, I guess, two-part question. Number one is what do you see as the top motivators? And second part of that question is do you see those motivators changing throughout our life? So for example, if you're a fresh grad versus retirement, do you see money becoming, further or up or down the list? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, those are great questions. So what really motivates you is honestly, it's more of a call for self-reflection rather than there's like some scientific truth of what motivates you.
Mhm.
Almost no one, when I ask them to like rank the top 10 list, almost no one puts money at the top. Like it's in the top 10, but it's not the top one. So more common than that is I want to do something I want to do work that's meaningful to me. I want to feel valuable, like my skill sets my skills are being utilized. And I want to be in a positive work environment as opposed to a toxic work environment or a hostile work environment where I feel like squeezed by my boss and like janked around every single day, which unfortunately and sadly, like it is the case for like too many people um, in the modern world's work right now. And I don't think that we have good enough solutions for that. Let me say what I mean. So there's a lot of talk about job design, both inside academia and in the business world. So we talk about like, okay, like how do I like try to make my job a better place? But the number one prescription for like what can you really do is to try to like think about what's good about your job, or to try to say, oh, I can reinterpret my job as, not a custodian or like a janitor at NASA. I'm helping to put a man on the moon. And like, that's what I'm doing. And I think there's something to that, but I think that is not enough because in many cases, trying to just become at peace with a job that is structurally bad is kind of like slapping a band-aid over, I'll say a gaping wound. It's not really fixing the problem. And, and, but it's framed as a solution. And in many cases, that's the solution that's being offered. But I think we can do better. And I think a better way to do it is look for ways to make work better in the first place, rather than just saying, here's how you make peace with like a job that you don't like. Like, what if there are better ways to design work? And what if there's like value on the table where if I can design my job in a smarter way, then it could be a win-win for me and my organization, right? We could find ways where we get more done and and feel like it was easy. And let me give you an example. So in one of my recent academic papers, which was published in Proceedings of the National Academy of Science, we introduced this idea called the streak end. And this builds on the peak end rule, which was made famous by Daniel Kahneman, the Nobel Prize winner. So what the streak end rule does is it is basically what it does apply to your job. What do you think about your job and like how much you like it and like whether you should quit? About the past, but you don't for equally weight every single day, every single moment. It's like too long, too much for you to wrap your mind around. Instead, there are sort of two moments that float to the top of your mind. And one is the end. Like, what's the last thing you did? Like, how did my day end if we're done with work today? And that's top of mind. But the second to last thing you did is really not. Like, I'm not saying you immediately forget, but it's not how the story ended. So it's not nearly as psychologically salient. In fact, it's about 50 times less salient than the last thing you did. The second to last thing you did, 50 times less salient. The third to last thing, 50 times less salient, and so on. There's something special about what the current end is. And then the other one, and I think this is even more important, is this. You think of the longest streak of, let's say, bad things that happen to you at work, or possibly good things as well. And so, like, let's say your job is composed of like a sequence of tasks, and some are hard and some are easy. Okay. And if you get hit with like three hard tasks in a row, that's going to create a much more memorable experience for you than if it was like easy, hard, easy. You can kind of like brush that away, and it goes back out of sight, out of mind, like pretty fast. As you keep doing other things, your focus redirected towards like the present. But if you got a streak of bad luck and it was just hard, 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 hard for whatever reason, you don't forget that. You'll never forget the worst streak of experiences that you had at your job. And that is the other moment that flows to the top of your mind. When you're thinking about like big decisions, like, is this it? And so what we show is that if you can break up those streaks by changing the order in which tasks are done, and that's it, you keep the total amount of work done the same, then you can vastly reduce the risk that a worker quits by at least 22%, which is incredibly valuable. So for free, all you're doing is you are making a structural change, but the same amount of work is getting done. Money was spent. And actually, the worker has a much more positive experience of work. They like it better. So it's a true win-win. And it's those kinds of like structural behavioral interventions that I think are really understudied compared to other things like, let's say, certainly financial incentives and nudges as well, which maybe we can talk more about. But it's, so the general theme here is I think that what's crucial, especially as the world changes like faster than ever, and we're getting like new work environments. I'm thinking of like the gig economy, the rise of AI, like we need new ideas. And it's important not to apply, not to try to get like too narrowly focused on certain solutions that may be top of mind. Like, how can we make peace with a job that feels bad to us, right? How can we cope with a structurally bad situation? And I think we can do a lot better than that, but we sort of have to expand our mental horizon about what we're looking for. And then ideally, we want to test that too. So we have evidence behind it as well.
I love that. Now, I was thinking through my own experience, and people always ask me, how do I structure my schedule? And I tell them I structure it, each day of the week has a specific item. So, for example, Mondays are finance and admin day. And I hate Mondays. I hate finance and admin day, but I do the most difficult thing at the very beginning. So, going back to the streak, I know every Monday. So, I have Tuesday to Friday. It's something I enjoy doing. Mondays I hate. So, going back to the streak theory, if I were to continue doing that, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, maybe even the Thursday, I'd probably be burned out. I'd probably be going crazy at that point. But the fact that I spread it out over, one day a week, then it makes me less receptive to breaking down mentally. So I think that's just maybe one
Mm.
example that hopefully brings your
Yeah.
sense of life.
Yeah. 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 Thank you. Yeah. I totally agree. I mean, and so I think like what we want to do is that's a great structural solution. And let me give you another example that this brings to life for me. So what many people do when they start their workday is they check their email. And so they use the time when they're the freshman, they have the most energy, the most brain power to deal with things. And the best way to use that is to like tackle the hard stuff, the stuff that really requires them to be on your A game. So for academics, that's usually not checking your email. Okay. And I think for other people too, right? So there's a time and a place for email for sure, but it's not the first thing. Nonetheless, that's kind of the natural human behavior because it just feels natural to us. We don't even follow that email overnight. And it's just kind of what we naturally gravitate toward. So if we can dodge that bullet, then we'll reallocate our energy and attention levels in a better way, where we want to put like our the largest part of our attention towards the toughest projects that benefit most from it, where the marginal return is greater to our investments of energy. And then email simply doesn't take much energy. It's still important, but it's not important enough to be the first thing we do every single day in the vast majority of cases. And see, so like simply yourself that question, you think like, oh, that makes perfect sense. But most people don't ask themselves that question because they sort of, it's like they had intuition about things that many of us, we turn on our smartphones at the beginning of the day. We check our email. It feels like it demands a reply. And if we don't reply, we get this like knot in our stomach. And then it starts sucking up our mental bandwidth until we do. So we feel like we're doing the right. We are doing something. So we are accomplishing something. And so we ask ourselves the question, am I getting something done? And the answer is, yeah, yeah. But it's really satisfying, right? We're not asking ourselves the right question, which is, could I get something better done? And the answer to that question is always yes. The key thing here is being like curious enough and thinking outside the box enough to ask yourself a question, and maybe you'll get a different answer that goes to the top of your mind, and then trying it out and see if it works better.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And so I'm curious because, let's say you don't know someone and you're trying to pitch an idea or a product or service, whatever it is you're trying to pitch to someone else, and you're trying to obviously influence them in a manner that's hopefully beneficial win-win for both parties, but you don't know the person. Is there a way, are there questions you can ask them to unearth their motivations? Or, how would you go about structuring that if once again it's a new person, you haven't met them before? What's the process like?
So first of all, I would say that's like 80% of the solution right there. So thinking about how do I unearth their motivations is always not what the typical person does. And already by looking for that, that's 80% of the way there. So the best practice, if you don't know, is sort of twofold. So before the conversation starts, you want to do your homework and try to figure it out. Because the first thing you say in an interaction, in a conversation, in a negotiation, in a pitch is so important due to the power of like anchoring, framing, the default effect, everything else. It is so incredibly important that moving back from that, the best thing you can possibly do is figure out the question, figure out the answer to the question you asked before you say, do your best to discover their true interests, what they really want before the interaction starts. And then you're in an incredibly good spot to succeed. And then when it does start, one of the first things you do, if not the very first, is ask them, hey, what's the most important goal for you here? Like, what priority of yours is most important among all the things that you'd be interested in accomplishing? And that does two things. One is it gives you crucial information. So hopefully you were well prepared, but good is not perfect. And you can always do better. And maybe amazed what you can learn about people just by asking them. And actually, you ask people a question, and this is not obvious to most people, but when you ask people a question, you put an incredible amount of pressure on them to respond. That's what want to answer your question, right? More than you think. So if we think about like asking people for directions, like you'll suppose you're in a new city. The typical person thinks, oh, like asking for directions is awkward. Like, what if they don't like me? What if they say no? I don't want to be burdened. But when you sort of flip it around and think, okay, if someone asks me for directions, what would I do? And so, and that's what's going to happen. So if you ask them, what are your hopes and dreams? What's your most important priority here? Then first of all, they're going to tell you, which is going to provide you with incredibly valuable information. And second of all, you're sending a signal to them about what kind of interaction this is going to be. And the signal is, this is going to be about cooperation. And I'm looking for a win-win. and I see myself as having priorities aligned with yours. And then they're going to trust you more. And you're on your way to building a good relationship, which is good in the long term and is good in the short term because it's going to mean they're going to reciprocate your positive outreach to them with a positive outreach to you as well. The vast majority of the time, that's the conversation you want to have. And you always want. So let me talk about what most people do just for a brief second. They don't do that. What they do is they walk in expecting a fight, right? So if I walk into like if I'm going to talk about salary with my boss or my job with my boss, and then my mouth gravitates towards salary because money is salient, and talking about one thing is simpler than talking about more than one thing. And I immediately feel a lot of tension, and I'm thinking, hey, this can't end well because obviously I want a higher salary. My boss probably wants to give me a lower salary. Or we think the buyers and sellers, the buyer always wants a lower price. The seller always wants to sell at a higher price. This is going to be the so most people, when trying to negotiate at all, or when they try to influence people, they will be thinking, what I need to do is pressure them. And I need to be tough, and I'm just going to start banging the drum and then hope that I wear them down. Or that's what I feel like I have for you. And notice they're not going to trust you. You're going to make another meeting. No information will be exchanged. You won't learn anything. And it can only end one of two ways. Either they learn and you lose, or vice versa. Plan A is starting out nice. You can always turn nasty later, but it's much harder to go from nasty to nice. So that's what you want. You want to look for the win-wins. And this is true for anything beyond negotiation. This is true if you're a leader, if you're making a pitch, if you're selling a product. You want to look for the win-wins and communicate to whoever's listening that you see your goals as aligned. You're looking for cooperation. And when you do that, they're going to want to cooperate with you back because they're going to immediately infer from your offer to them of cooperation that this is someone who has my best interests in heart. And that's how you want to start.
So I completely agree with you what you're saying. I'm gonna throw a tough question back at you. So going back to the buyer seller situation, let's say that it's the first time you're meeting them, and as a potential buyer, your guardrails are up. You're like, oh, I don't really know this person, I don't really trust this person. Would I necessarily, I'm just thinking out loud, would I necessarily give this person the right answer? Or would I just give them kind of lip service and say, oh, I'm looking for, more money, or we need to grow our business? But in reality, you're like, oh, actually, I need to fix my team issue or whatever it is. Like, do you see that psychologically being an uphill battle for folks who maybe haven't built that trust beforehand, who are entering a situation when they're just meeting something and the other person kind of has their fist up, or they're really guarded?
Yeah, absolutely. This is going to be the typical situation. If you don't know someone well, then one of the most important things you could do is build trust. And this is like obviously culturally dependent as well. Sometimes before you talk business, you have to build personal trust first, right? And I'm thinking of Asia here, right?
Yeah.
The mistake you make is talking about business first. That's not what you want to do. You have to become their friend, right?
Yeah.
And that sets up that sets up for success later. So the key is to a successful business negotiation has nothing to do with business really, and it comes before the negotiation. Now, but more generally, now everywhere building trust is going to succeed. So it's one of the first things you want to do. And so here's what I want to say, Joe. I think you're too worried about it. So, and here's why. If you start out a conversation with someone you've never spoken with before, by asking them, how can I help? What's your most important priority here? They're going to think this person's looking for a friend. And you'll start out on the right foot. And if that's the only thing you know about someone, then that's a signal to how the conversation is going to go. So maybe they're not willing to, maybe they're feeling anxious before you speak. But if the first words out of your mouth are, I'm looking for a win, and I'm looking for ways to help, then the vast majority of people are going to respond in kind. And it's going to surprise them too, right? Because it's not. So you'll also create a memorable experience for them. So that's the first thing I want to say is you're too afraid. And if you just go for it, hopefully from a well-prepared standpoint, where you kind of already know what they're going to say. And so because you're well prepared, you're in a good position to solve their problem
Mhm.
better than you would have been if you hadn't been prepared. And that's going to really impress them. And then they're going to see, wow, this person is, this person is not just lip service. They actually did something, and they signaled to me that they're going to be a reliable partner because they're always sort of giving me advice that proves that they invested something in this relationship. And that's going to make me want to trust them. Now that's said, like not everyone is trustworthy. If you find yourself dealing with a backstabber, you want to learn that as quickly as possible, and then stop revealing information. But at the beginning, if you never trust anyone, you will not succeed in the long term, right? So you have to be willing to fail in order to succeed. Now that being said, if you want to hedge your risks, you want to be well prepared, so you know that you have a good sense as good as you can before the interaction. Um, what kind of person you're dealing with. And let me bring this back to like influence tools.
Mm.
So you, maybe if you're an academic, this goes down saying, but to many people, if you walk in expecting to fight, and you walk in also think, oh, you know what motivates people? Well, then the lesson of that view of the world is that it doesn't really matter what I say, as long as I'm offering you, you're going to do it, right? And if you don't do it, well, the incentive must not have been large enough, or something like that. Like how I frame it to you, that doesn't really matter, right? Whether I'm saying if you perform well, I'll give you a bonus, versus if you don't perform well, I'll give you a penalty. That shouldn't really matter. Um, the question that was at the beginning when I say I want to understand you, like tell me about hopes and dreams to a traditional economist. That's all she taught. Doesn't mean anything. All that matters is what happens at the end. Mhm. And that misses almost everything that's important, because what we know from behavioral science is that things like branding really matter. So let's take a classic example. Um, let's say I have an extra $5,000 in my budget, and I want to maximize your performance. What's a better way to do that? Is it to say, Joe, if you perform above average this coming year, I'll give you $5,000 at the end of the year as an extra bonus. Sound good? Now that will improve your performance by a certain amount, most likely. And if we flip that around though and say, Joe, I wouldn't want to improve your performance, so I'm going to give you $5,000 upfront before the year starts. And then at the end of the year, if you are a below average performer, I'm going to take it away. Okay. So this is called the clawback incentive. It's much less common than like a post hoc bonus that happened at the end. And clawback incentives, which invoke loss aversion, of course, are much more powerful. They're about twice as powerful, right? And this is because in our minds, losses are about twice as strong as equivalent gain. So if you know that, then you have a way to basically double your influence power without spending any more money. Now, there are also drawbacks to clawback incentives as well. But if your goal is to increase motivation in the current task at hand, then whether or not you frame incentives as gains versus losses, which is always in your power to do, is the tool you want in your toolbox.
Absolutely love that. I'm taking notes because the client was asking me recently. They're trying to motivate the sales team, and so they're looking at bonuses post thing. But I think that could be worth experimenting, offering this in advance, and saying, "Hey, look, we'll give you this amount now. If you hit your quota, whatever it is, then you keep it. If not, then we take it back." But so once again, I
Yep.
love that because it's very counterintuitive to the way we think. And once again, that fear of losing something is, like I said,
Yeah.
stronger than anybody.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. So I am a believer in organizational behavior and human decision processes, which proves that it's counterintuitive. So what we do there is we look at whether people use gain frames versus loss frames, in situations where, let's say, the game frame is the right thing to use or the loss frame is the right thing to use. And the punchline is everyone wants to use the game frame all the time,
Mm.
no matter what frame is strategically better. And again, I understand why. It's because using the game frame feels good. It's positive language.
Yeah.
Most language we use is positive, and you're supposed to be pretty good people, more or less. And I want to be a good person to you. I want to build a good relationship. I want to use positive language. So there's no bad guy in this situation, but there is something like, as you put it, it's very powerful. There's a side effect, a byproduct of my desire to be nice. And here it is. If I always try to use positive language, that means I'm always framing your incentives and gains. And whether or not I realize it, that's going to nudge your behavior in one certain direction. For example, it's going to nudge you towards risk aversion. It's going to say things are good. And taking a risk is exactly what I don't want to do now. I don't want to rock the boat because things are good enough. That's what I'm communicating to you. I'm not just communicating I'm a nice person by saying, here are rewards, here are gains, here are good things if you perform well. And doing more than being nice. I'm telling you, whether I realize it or not, that this is an environment where you shouldn't take a risk. And sometimes that's what we want,
Mm.
but often it's not. So if you have a new product or a new service, or you're a manager and you like marshal support for a new plan, a new strategy, then you're going to need to marshal people around something that they perceive as risky.
Mm.
And if you use positive language there, then that strategy is going to backfire on you because maybe you're literally saying, please take a risk. But what they're hearing is, hey, you're saying that things are good enough because you're talking in positive terms. And what that tells me psychologically, whether I realize it or not, is that this is the time to not take a risk because things are good enough. What do we need to do? That's a situation where you want to consider using the law frame. And that if we don't switch strategies, we're going to lose. And here's exactly how much we're going to lose. And what you're telling people, and that immediately is that you're going to signal to people in some like deep-seated intuitive way, okay, this is the time to take a risk because I feel like if I don't, failure is certain. And I'd rather have a chance at success than have a sure failure right now. That is the psychology of I have to take a risk, actually. And what's amazing is that we're all like this, or nearly all of us, right? So, like, some of us think of ourselves as risk takers, and some of us think of ourselves as like conservative, not risk takers. I'm just gonna like go with what's tried and true. That works. But that's mostly an illusion. The truth is, for the vast majority of people, when they think they're dealing with the choice between good versus good, they are going to act in a risk averse way. And those same people, if they think they're dealing with this bad or this bad, they're going to start flipping coin. And that is an incredibly powerful insight that you want to keep in mind. Now, I'm not saying always use the game frame or always using the loss frame, but I'm saying it's a tool in your toolbox. And you can do a lot better than sort of the natural use of the tool, which in this case happens to be use game frames all the time. That's going to trigger risk aversion in everyone else, which may be what you want in some cases, but in other cases, not.
David, there's so much nuggets of insights in here. This is my, we'll have to do a part two series of this because I'm taking notes mentally in my head, from the streak of three, the clawback theory, the loss frame, the game frame. But one thing I want to add on to it, which is adding context. So going back to you were saying, hey, I want to find out more about you. I want to, looking for ways to help you, and then asking the question, what is your biggest priority? So, I mean, this was a knowledge bomb in about half an hour. So, David, like I said, we're definitely doing part two. So stay tuned for that. And I want to thank you so much for sharing all your research and insights with us here today.
Great. Thank you, Joe. It's been a pleasure.
Awesome. Well, I know you have found value in this for everyone's watching and listening. Please feel free to share it to everyone. It's going to be super helpful. Thank you guys so much, and we'll see you on the next episode.